Either way, though, as per usual, a spoiler alert for everybody. I will be reviewing the movie in full. Therefore, the conclusion will be revealed during the course of this review. So if you want to join us, maybe like an hour or hour and a half after this, then feel free. But yeah, for those of you that haven't seen it and remained on the broadcast, The Wailing is a 2016 South Korean horror film. It was written and directed by Na Hong Jin. I'm very sorry about all the mispronunciations that I'm going to do throughout this review. Na Hong Jin is a South Korean film director, producer, and screenwriter. Has won multiple awards with his films and is most known for violent thriller, and horror characteristics in his film. He's been very celebrated. This movie stars Kwak Do-won, Hwang Jung-min, and Chun-wo-hee. It centers on a policeman, who's played by Kwak Do-won, by the way, who investigates a series of mysterious killings and illnesses in a remote Korean village called Gokseong in order to save his daughter. The film was both a commercial and a critical success. But let's see if it was a Kubian success. That sounded kind of strange, but we'll roll with it. Anyway, on to the analysis. Now, I was a bit worried to review a horror movie because I don't think I've ever done that on this channel before. Do you like horror movies in general? I do. But horror movies tend to be like quite lackluster in terms of like the story and everything like that. They're designed to scare people essentially, and very often they just they basically just exist to scare you. And the story just sort of gets lost. It wasn't. I wasn't immediately convinced that this was going to be a good movie at the beginning, because the entire movie starts off with a passage from the Bible, from Luke, I believe, talking about ghosts, which is a little bit of a tired theme, I believe. But at least it was a narration. At least it wasn't some kind of a lazy expositional writing, so that wasn't that bad. But then the movie actually began, and straight off the bat, I could see that these guys knew what the fuck they were doing. The visuals were stunning, but especially the atmosphere that they created. We started off in overlooking a village, or like a house in a village, essentially a South Korean village, and we heard all the rain all around us, and it was dark. And then there was a edit into the house where the rain sort of shifted into like sort of the rain that you hear when you're indoors, like the muffled sounds of rain, and then a phone ringing to wake up a person. And the atmosphere inside that house and throughout the rain immediately sort of like gripped me. When you can create such an atmosphere with your first couple of shots without even speaking a word, it really goes to show that that you have a certain set of skills, and these are exactly the kind of openings that I really enjoy, when you're like setting the atmosphere, setting the vibe immediately just through the visuals and the sound. The audio mix especially, it was like really so simple yet so effective in setting the kind of mood that you're supposed to have straight off the bat. Now you guys know that I'm a writer, so I like to focus on dialogue, and I always keep talking about it, dialogue. But watching a film that isn't originally English, I can't, obviously, my analysis can't be, taken for granted, I suppose, because I haven't seen the movie in English, because it isn't in English, it's in Korean. I've seen it in Korean with English subtitles, so it very much falls down to how the subtitles are written. And they were written well, but even despite not knowing the language, I could already tell that this movie was written quite well. The dialogue felt really, really grounded. And what I mean by that is that you feel like you're in there, like you feel like these are real people talking to each other in a real life setting. And when you can achieve something like that in a movie that's about, the potentially the occult or some supernatural forces, and you can make yourself believe that you are actually in that situation, or the movie, makes you believe that you're in that situation. That's very effective. The sort of example that I'm going to give you is like straight at the beginning. The police officer or the policeman, Yonggo, or Jonggo, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, got woken up, and he has to go essentially to a crime scene to investigate. And we can see like immediately that he is a little bit slow. He's a bit of a homely guy, and doesn't really want to go out, but he knows it's his duty, like he has to. And we see him explain that somebody died, and that it's the wife of the ginseng farmer, and like on the other side of the village. And he has to explain that these like very few couple words in like 2 sentences to his wife, then to his mother, and then to his wife again when they demand to know more answers why he has to leave so early in the morning. And he's just, he just like monotonously repeats it every time, not really offering anything extra, but they're still demanding more information, which just feels like the real kind of conversation that these people would have, or like people in general would have, because he doesn't know anything more, and he doesn't want to go either, but so he just keeps saying stuff until everybody shuts up, which in this context felt very real, felt very grounded, Yeah. So moving on, the characters. Then there is another like really excellent vision in terms of writing, because characters, in my opinion, should move the plot along. Essentially, they are there to be sort of the conduits for the audience to experience the plot just like they do, essentially, and for us to feel with them, we need to somewhat like live in their situation a little bit, but they're also there to essentially make up the plot. And what I mean by that is the cops, the village cops, when they're investigating this gruesome crime of this farmer killing his entire family and being like, looking really, really out of it and really weird, almost as if high on something, they are completely bewildered, and there isn't like a genius detective that would like give them all the answers, or them like noticing little clues and like thinking and discussing and all of that. The classic fucking detective story mumbo jumbo, right? There are just these couple of these guys, these village cops that never really experienced anything too horrific, looking at the scene and sort of like almost being sick and being scared and always saying, oh my god, this bastard, this is horrible, and like always expressing themselves, but being confused by everything and not really getting any answers. It just felt so real, it just felt that this is like a real story, that this is happening to real people. When you're able to achieve with your dialogue like a grounded character that's in an interesting situation, that I think is the perfect recipe for your story to be believed, or for the audience to really feel with you. I was just about to ask what you thought about the character creation. Yeah, as I said, essentially. So I hope that I answered your question with that. I will talk more about the character later on, of course. But yeah, it was this bewilderment that not only made me feel like I'm part of the situation, but also informed the pacing of the movie, which was great. Now, because there are these like strange killings, because these killings start ramping up. It's always essentially just some village person going mad and murdering their entire family, and then sort of being in almost like a trance state, not really being able to talk to the officers, and sometimes even attacking them. And everybody's confused by this. And because these village cops aren't like genius detectives or something, and they're like easily scared as well. They're scared by the people. They like, for example, run away when they lunge at them. The plot moves like really slowly because they're not able to figure it out. It's a long movie, 2 hours and a half, but I feel like the beginnings of the movie where the cops just don't know what to do and they're just like getting snippets of information almost by chance rather than them doing any like actual good work, felt or made the plot progress in such a way that the tension built up very naturally. And naturally built up tension is the tension that works. So I did actually feel tense for these characters because they were sort of like, thrown into this very mysterious world that they didn't quite understand and didn't know what to do with. So yeah. Now, I'll move. I'll talk about the characters later, I reckon. All right. Sorry, I had to mute my mic there because I was pouring my tea. Right. What else? Oh yeah, the film. Oh yeah, yeah. So moving for a while away from the characters, let's talk about how the film actually communicates certain, like what's happening. For example, it's sort of like very mysterious because we don't know exactly what is happening. But it makes the audience like keep pace with what the characters understand in very subtle and very but very very smart and clever ways, right? So when the main police officer, our principal character Yong-go, is at the hospital, he hears some commotion upstairs, so he goes up and sees a guy wriggling in pain and many doctors trying to hold him down, and he's just completely covered with blood and everything, and it's like a scary scene. And he's looking at him and sort of focusing into his eyes, sort of as if he was trying to recognize him. And I myself didn't know who this guy was, but then there was a quick edit that the film made back to the first murder, where we saw the ginseng farmer sit in front of his house in a trance, and there was just like a 1 second edit to him, and then an edit back to Yong-go, the main character, him looking at the guy again, and then the guy wriggled in pain and died. And it's these sort of subtleties that are real like in a movie, because I couldn't tell who that was wriggling there in pain. And so at this point, and this is where I think comparisons could, a comparison would make you understand why I like this so much. In like an average movie, the main character would say, "Oh my God, that's the ginseng farmer," to like nobody, maybe. He would just say it out loud because we need the exposition as audience, as the viewer. We didn't know. But this film decides to rather like show this quick image into that scene that all of us remember because it was so memorable, of this guy sitting in a trance and having like blisters on his head and everything. So not only did it communicate what it wanted to communicate in a much more subtle and clever way, it also made it feel more real by doing that, because we didn't have the main characters blurt out exposition. But instead, we experience something that I believe all of us experience, right? Because how do you recognize people? Whether it's like people you, maybe not like your closest family, but people you've met a couple times, or even one time. When you meet them again, when you look at them, you have like a flash of a memory in your mind of that person, of when you met that person before, that helps you identify who they are and what sort of relationship they have to you. That's sort of like our learned, psychological response, our cognitive process in our mind, so to always like recall a memory to be able to identify that person. And it felt in the movie like exactly what happens in my head, for example. And that is a sign of great writing. When you don't have just random exposition and you have this In the defense of movies doing that, I narrate my life and talk out loud like that all the time. Well, that is very nice, Gautier, but not many people do that. I'm not surprised that you do that, but I must say that that is not a common thing. So in movies, I will stand by the fact that it's still cheap exposition. So yeah. There is apart from like these subtleties that work very well, the entire tension that I told you about is built up not only through the characters and through how they experience the plot essentially, but the plot and the happenings, or like rather the situations that these characters get into, are also really well written and really well built up. The main our principal character Yongo actually finds, he starts having dreams about this Japanese man and starts hearing stories about him being behind the murders, like cursing people in some way. And there's this whole scene where, or a couple scenes actually, a sequence where they go with like a witness to where this Japanese man lives, and they go into his hut and sort of investigate, and they discover a shrine, and in that shrine there's photos of all the deceased people, and then the Japanese man comes along, and then they're like really afraid, and then they leave. But then one of the officers that was with Yongo, his friend, who didn't speak since they left the hut and was completely terrified, when Yongo finally snaps him out of it, his friend shows him a boot of his daughter, of Yongo's daughter, of our principal character's daughter. And this whole sequence of events was so well written in not only creating the tension and ramping it up when they're face to face with the Japanese men and these police officers, they're afraid of him, but also like the sort of like payoff of this tension, where it sort of like reaches the crescendo, because now we know if this person is possibly cursing people, then it might be the daughter of our main character that we've seen throughout the film as well. So that was excellent. Now I think it's time to go back to the character arc, or the characters rather, the character arc. Character arcs are something that I believe should happen in every good movie, in every good story rather. There should be some kind of character arc. A character should change in some way based on the experience of the movie, because like it's maybe not a necessity, but when you're learning to write, for example, they always tell you of these like sequences that a story should take place, or rather things that should be in a story. There should be like the main character, obviously. Then you would have the side characters, blah blah blah. But that main character is supposed to go on a journey, and throughout that journey, he has to encounter obstacles that he needs to overcome through either some kind of like his ability, or by overcoming that within himself, right? So him overcoming fear, for example, that would be an obstacle for him to overcome in order to reach his final goal and to get some sort of a conclusion. And throughout this, throughout like all these obstacles, which you pretty much have in like almost every movie, because otherwise you wouldn't really have a story. The character should change. Now, this is something that lots of movies ignore, and honestly, I don't think that maybe it's not necessary in all the movies, but it definitely adds to the depth that you experience, because you go on a journey with a character, and ideally art should inform you or give you something, give you some sort of a value, and once you get some sort of value, it changes you inside, right? So the character should change alongside you, essentially, or you should experience his change, and his change should also change you in some way. That's sort of like the very abstract theory behind character arcs. And Yongo, after discovering this shoe in the hands of his friend, saying that it came from the Japanese man's hut, started sort of very slowly but very smartly, like as in writing wise, to change. Just straight off the rip, Yongo was not only a homely man, but we could see him running away very often from the possessed or from the possessed people. Even before they looked like really crazy, they didn't look like this, for example, right? But they just felt a little bit. They was really like a little bit dirty, and they like jumped at him and lunged at him, and he was like frightened and screaming on the ground. So he was a little bit of a coward. There was actually even a scene at the beginning of the movie where, after one such occurrence, he was sitting sort of defeated at the police station, and his daughter, his little 10-year-old daughter, came to him and said that, mom is sending these clothes. We have a new shirt there, and a new pair of boxers, implying, of course, that he shat himself. And him seeing that his daughter brought these things to him, he was just sort of like, he was sitting but hunched over, and he couldn't look in his daughter's eyes. He felt like great shame, which was like amazing emotional writing as well, because we saw him experience the fear and then extreme shame in front of his daughter. And this whole scene of the daughter just sort of like nudging him, and him not being able to look at her and just looking down onto the ground, was something really powerful. But more than that, if you like take into account this scene and Yongo's journey throughout the movie, we see that he experienced an extreme character arc where, because of the now perceived threat to his daughter, he started inquiring a little bit more forcefully. He went back to the Japanese man's hut and destroyed his hut, and yelled at him to leave and to leave his family alone. Which was, he worked into that after seeing that, that his daughter started getting the blister that the possessed people have, and that she started behaving differently, that she started eating different things, and that she started being more irate. And so there was a long period of time where he was experiencing his daughter coming into some sort of like a demonic possession, essentially. And seeing that created dread in him. Rather than fear, we could see that he was like dreading this. It was like a more powerful emotion, a more formative emotion, which eventually grew and transformed into fury. And that's where he became a man on a mission. He first went to the Japanese man's hut and destroyed everything. And then when his daughter didn't get better, he had to get a shaman. Then he got a couple of his friends to go up to the hut and destroy it. Then he led a charge, or not, more or less. He managed to kill a possessed man that was by the Japanese man's hut. And all of these things, he still experienced fear when the possessed person lunged at him. He was still screaming, but he came back and beat him to save his friends, essentially. And all of these things combined, like the fear for his daughter, the need to save his friends, all of these things changed him into like a man of action, which was a far cry from the cowardly man that we saw at the beginning. And a character arc that is executed so well, and that is so massive, because he really was a completely different person, but it was still believable. Is proof of awesome writing. I mean, if you can achieve something like that alongside the other things, then it's an excellently written movie. What do you think about that, Spud? What do you think about the character arc of Yong-ho? I agree with a lot of it. Okay. There's something you don't agree with. Anyway, Carrying on, halfway through the movie, like at the halfway line, I started, you know, being a little afraid that this movie will take the same route as the menu, which is a great build-up, amazing atmosphere building, great writing in the first half, and in the second half, everything sort of falls down again on the surface level, because that's what happened in the menu. The reason why I was afraid was because they added a shaman that was now dancing some sort of like a ritual against the Japanese man who was like suffering in his hut as a result of this ritual, and there was the daughter also screaming for pain, which now because like I'll explain why it felt a little bit disappointing, because throughout the movie the powers of these possessions, they felt very mysterious. The characters didn't understand, they were completely bewildered, and therefore we were bewildered. But now you had this shaman who was effective in countering this force, so it was essentially just a magical battle. It was a Harry Potter duel essentially, which felt like a big decrease in terms of the themes that were being explored in the first half. What I like about this movie is, unlike most horror films where characters begin to make the right choices to alleviate the issue, these characters continually make the wrong choices. Yes, we'll definitely get back into that. Actually, that is a good sort of perspective to take when explaining further the second half of the movie. I said that I was afraid that it was going to be a little bit too shallow, but fortunately, the second half felt almost like a movie in its own, because we started getting like more bewildered and more confused by different things, because we all sort of accepted that this Japanese man was the ghost responsible for all of these happenings, essentially all of these curses. But then the shaman himself called the father Yong Ho, the policeman, and said that it's somebody else. There's a different evil ghost, and that evil ghost is like a girl that Yong Ho in fact has met when he was investigating some of the buildings where the possessed killings took place, and assumed she was just a witness that was a bit too shy. So now we weren't sure who exactly is the ghost. And all of this, mind you, happened after something that could have very easily been the end of the movie, because like it was so confusing. I don't really want to like recite the plot here, but essentially they managed to successfully kill the Japanese man or Japanese ghost. That's how I refer to him, by pretty much by mistake, which was also very very amazing, because they hunted him. And he managed to escape, and then when they were driving away in their truck, they accidentally ran him over, which was again something that I thoroughly enjoyed, because it again deviates from the classic recipe of like the hero bucks up and kills the guy who's threatening his family, and that's it. They actually failed, but then they managed by good fortune, presumably, to kill this guy anyway. And this but we also learn that the reason why this guy was on the road was because he was lured there by the girl that we later on started assuming was actually the evil spirit, because the shaman started telling Yong Ho that the young woman is actually the evil spirit, and the Japanese man was another shaman who was trying to stop her. So now we were confused, and this was a brilliant setup for the conclusion, where essentially, like okay, I'll this is very confusing, right? So I don't know which end to sort of start from. But essentially, okay, so I'll just continue saying this. After the Japanese man or ghost or whatever is killed, presumably, Yong Ho rushes to the hospital where his daughter, her situation was critical before he left. But he goes there and fully expecting her to be dead or something, and he goes there and sees her that she's fine, and actually a little better. And there's this extremely powerful emotional scene, and here is where I need to say extremely good performances throughout this movie, extraordinarily good. And we have this very powerful emotional scene where the father that finally got all his strength and and overcame his cowardice hugs his daughter and starts crying, and the daughter is crying, the whole family is crying. It's a very powerful scene, and honestly they could have ended that movie there and it still would have been a great fucking movie. But they didn't. They followed through with this whole thing with the shaman saying that there's this other evil spirit, and then as the policeman went around his house, he met this other evil spirit, and this presumed evil spirit, this young woman, tells him, no, the Japanese man is actually the evil spirit, and the shaman is in on it. And you have to stay here because if you go to your house now, the demon will kill your family. You have to wait for the 3 rooster calls, right? And there is this very tense moment where Young-ho is actually on the phone with the shaman. The shaman is telling him this is the evil spirit. Just fuck it. Just fucking like get out. Don't let her tempt you. And she's saying like your family is in danger. You cannot leave. But she's saying it in such a calm manner that it feels like a ghost. And I honestly, at that point, did not know what the fuck was happening. And here is why I feel like this movie is really, really good. I rarely have experienced a moment in movies where I didn't know what the fuck was happening and I enjoyed it. Because I think that it's really difficult to do. I have it written here somewhere. I think like I wrote a note that explains it right. Yeah, the final 25 minutes is so well in constantly confusing the audience and not knowing what or who to believe. This is extraordinarily hard to do well and not make your audience annoyed. But the movie said everything so well that I'm on pins and needles, a million theories running through my head, a sign of an excellent, well-written movie. So yeah, that's what I mean, right? When you purposefully confuse your audience to the point where they don't know what is happening at all, and they don't have, like they don't have even like a thread to follow sort of it, and they're this confused by what is happening. It is difficult to do without annoying, at least me. I tend to be annoyed because I'm like, well, what the fuck are you doing here? What are you doing? But this movie is set up so well, and it had and all the characters had such incredible journeys, as well as the plot being so vast and complex. It just felt like it felt so incredibly tense. And spoiler alert, the Yong-go didn't believe this young woman, feeling that she is the evil spirit, so he ran back to his house, which I honestly would have done as well. I was under the impression that she was actually the evil spirit, but then when he runs back to his house, his daughter, Mi-yin, I believe, actually murdered his entire family. And that genuinely shocked me. I don't think I have ever seen a movie that produces such an extremely powerful scene, such an extremely emotionally powerful scene of a family finally being safe after going through hardship. And like so emotional and so powerful. And then to kill that family off after. Like that is, to me, like it was insane. It was genuinely insane, genuinely powerful, and extremely original. Like I honestly, I can't think of anything else that any other movie that has done this, because it was a very powerful scene of them being saved, And also, like, it was after like a double plot twist as well. Like at first we thought the Japanese man was the ghost, and they won. Then the shaman is like, no, it's actually the young woman that's the ghost. I just figured it out. And we see her and we assume, oh my god, she is actually the evil ghost. And then we, the audience would yell at Yongo to go back to his house. But then when he finally does, his family is actually murdered, the Japanese man is revealed in conversation with this priest friend of Yongo's. There's a whole thing, and he changes form into actually being a demon. And then the shaman enters the house with everybody being dead and takes photos in posterity. And so you would have to assume that the ghost and the shaman actually did work together, however unbelievable it would seem. And it wasn't just like a random, like, you know, like that they would just throw it there to subvert expectations. Like all of these things you could kind of like gather from watching the movie as it sort of unfoiled. So it was really exceptional. The director actually does that in some of his other films too, giving the audience a victory before yanking it from their grasp. I think he does it best in this film. Yeah, that honestly surprised me. I don't think I've seen any other films from Nahong Jin, but yeah, from photos from the movie, he actually feels like he actually looks like a really young man, which also surprised me. Like this was an exceptionally well-made movie, and yeah, it genuinely still like baffles my mind. How well it did in not only creating the characters and the atmosphere, but also making me feel pins and needles and completely tense through a series of plot twists that sort of go back on themselves. The victory being yanked away from my grasp. It's difficult to do all these things without annoying the audience or without feeling like you know the film is just telling you to fuck off. But they did it in such a way where we genuinely felt for these characters, and where we were like super invested in this story, that it just worked, you know, it just worked. So yeah, a brave feat by a movie to do this, and I don't think it felt original, it felt brave, it felt fresh, and I don't remember the last time I've seen a movie like this. Usually when I watch movies, because I've seen plenty of them, and because I'm focusing on the writing and everything, very many things that I see, like I would say almost most things that I see, I kind of can imagine the mind of the writer, how they would like why they wrote it, and very often I see, oh, we're doing this, oh, we're writing like that, this is why we're doing this, this is why we're, you know, no, it just felt it feels like I'm like sometimes I'm feeling like I'm watching the same fucking movie every time, because it's just a set of themes that they sort of pick out. It sometimes feel like this. This is the first movie in a very long time where I actually felt like I'm watching something like a completely different experience that I'm used to. So yeah. In conclusion, excellent writing, complete with great story arcs and character arcs, awesome build-up of tension and plot, beautifully crafted plot twist, and super grounded and believable characters. Which, you know, that's just the industry sort of way of looking at it, but like it is important to say these things as well. Awesome performances all around as well, very important too. It made me feel like emotions very many times, which like I know it sounds very like cyborg-ish, but I honestly don't feel emotions very often when I watch movies. Rarely so. Even movies I enjoy, they don't actually make me feel a certain way, because I'm focusing on the writing more so than anything else. So I'm sort of like analyzing the movie in my head, and so I don't really let it sort of affect me. But this movie was so powerful in its characters and in sort of like taking me and dragging me into this world that I did actually feel what it wanted me to feel. Except fear, I wasn't frightened. Yeah, and there's like very many other things that we can talk about, like for example, how they approach the nature of evil and the nature of maladies, how they sort of like poked a little bit into like the Catholic way of understanding things versus the shamanism. It very much focused on the occult, or rather, you know, like maybe not the occult, but like ancient Asian beliefs and shaman rituals and all of these things. But overall, I think rather than all of these things, it was more a story about a father that goes through hell and back to to change completely, to almost succeed and then fail at the last hurdle, um, which even more so makes makes the movie feel real, makes the story feel real, you know. Um, but yeah, much like with Xanadu, which was a negative review, and the critics agreed with my negative review. The Wailing actually received a widespread critical acclaim. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 99% and an average rating of 8 out of 10 based on 82 critical reviews, and the site's consensus reads, "The Wailing delivers an atmospheric, cleverly constructed mystery whose supernatural thrills more than justify its imposing length." It was 2.5 hours. And yeah, Metacritic, on the Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 81 out of 100 based on 19 critics, indicating universal acclaim. And I gotta agree. If I had to rate it out of 10, probably 9.5. Yeah, 9.5. The reason why I'm giving it 9.5 rather than 10 is because 10 I feel are reserved for really powerful emotions. Like I really enjoyed this film. It made me feel emotional, and the writing was amazing, but it didn't make me cry, for example, you know. I would say that the only 10 out of 10 that I reviewed on this channel was the Portrait of a Lady on Fire that was suggested by Shadow, because that actually made me cry. So, you know. What is your thought on the demon reveal for the Japanese man? I may have stepped out. You mean stepped out as in like me not saying, or what do you mean stepped out? As in like you didn't pay attention, or stepped out because you were so frightened? I didn't actually talk about that. I just talk about the fact that I love the double plot twist, essentially, or rather the plot twist coming back on itself, essentially making us believe the Japanese man wasn't in fact the demon, but then it turns out that he actually really was the whole time. Stepped out as in I may have been away. Okay. So no, I only said that I really liked how the plot twist came about, that we believed that he was the demon the whole time, then we stopped believing it, and then in the end it was revealed that he actually was the demon, which I really liked. I didn't. Yeah. So I was sort of looking at it from the plot twist point of view. I don't. I don't have any particular opinion about him being the demon or not being the demon. I just like how it sort of panned out. What I do like, however, and something that I didn't mention, but now talking about the demon as well, is that pretty much like almost everybody in this movie is frightened at something, right? Which is very rare for a horror movie, because the bad guys are never frightened, right? They're ghosts, they're paranormal, whatever, or they're, you know, lunatics, but they're never frightened. In this movie, the demon, the Japanese man, when he was being hunted by the men, he was actually frightened, and he was actually suffering as well, which was again a stroke of genius in terms of writing as well. So yeah, I really liked that part. Japanese man being actually the demon. I liked it because you know, I liked the plot twist around it, essentially. It did make me think a little bit about whether it was on purpose that he was Japanese, because like, why was he Japanese? Was he Japanese in the story just to make him more of an outsider, perhaps, or to create that scene where the Korean priest had to translate the obscenities that the Korean police officer was yelling at the Japanese man? Maybe it was just because of that. But I was thinking, is it maybe cultural? Because there are, despite the fact that nowadays it's, I hear that it's not as strong, there is still much, you know, there are still like some kind of feelings between the Japanese and Koreans and Chinese and all the other countries that the Japanese Empire absolutely demolished and whose people they absolutely destroyed. Because Japan in Second World War, which I presume you guys all know, but it's not really being talked about that much, committed very many atrocities that their government isn't really readily admitting. Much like, for example, the German government, they do admit everything, and they do, their official stance is apologetic. Japanese government isn't really in the business of saying these things, and so there's still some kind of bad blood in these like Eastern Asian countries, and so I wondered whether that is perhaps the reason why this demon was a Japanese man. I wouldn't put cultural past. I wouldn't put cultural past it, to be honest. Yeah, but I agree. It may be easier to cast him as an outsider if he was a foreigner. Yeah. That was another thing. Yeah, because realistically, it might not be a cultural thing. Because once you say like this, oh, there's this Japanese man, you immediately know, he's a foreigner. But when you say, oh, there's this old guy who isn't from the village, it isn't as pithy. It isn't as easily and readily understandable that he is indeed an outsider, because he's from the same country. So. Yeah, I agree with you. It might just be that it's easier for the audience to understand that he's an outsider, or it's easier in terms of like the writing.